Welcome to the review. I'm the captain, and I'll be your host for today. Holiday. A time to celebrate, to break the shackles of the mundane routine. Every year, numerous amounts of people travel outside their own countries and cultures to explore and see a little bit of the world to satiate the curiosities. However, sometimes we just forget it was curiosity that killed the cat. And in many exuberance, we become ignorant of the environments and cultures of those around us and how they differ from our own. Today, in this episode, we shall be studying the disappearances of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, two graduate students from the Netherlands who journeyed into the Panama jungle and were never seen again. Let us begin. Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were two young, ambitious ladies who had just graduated from their college in the Netherlands. They had the whole world in front of them and was ready to make a difference. As such, upon graduation they decided that they would take a holiday, a vacation of sorts, into Panama. But not just a vacation, they were just going to go down there and help out the local language arts school. They arrived in Panama on March 15th, 2014, and gradually began making their way to Berenguer. It took them weeks to make their way, but as such, they explored the countryside and expanded their horizons. They absorbed the culture and befriended the locals, ever anticipating every opportunity to explore their new environment. They soaked it in with a hearty heart and wide-eyed exuberance. After their weeks of exploring the countryside, they arrived at Berenguer and made their way to the school, where they were scornfully told that they had arrived a week early. After hearing this, they returned to a local hostel and unpacked their things and set in to wait out the time. They decided why the adventure should end right here. Why not take this extra week to continue expanding their horizons? On April 1st, 2014, the two girls decided to kill a little time by going on a hike of the Pianista Trail. Ironically, they had scheduled this same trail one day later with a tour guide, but I guess their anticipation grew too much for them, so they set off on their own. The taxi driver said he dropped them off at 1:30 p.m. However, according to the girls' phone's records, this indicated they were actually dropped off somewhere between 11 a.m. and 12 noon. Due to eyewitness accounts, it is said that they were seen having lunch with two local young men before the hike, something that never seemed to come up later on in the investigations. The two girls, along with their host family's dog, whose name was Blue, began to set off at the trail during this time. Only the dog would return later that night to the family they had been living with. Understandably concerned, the family contacted the local authorities, who did not act. It wasn't until the next day when the scheduled tour guide appeared and was told of the situation that he set out on a search for the girls, along with the family and some of the locals that they had befriended. Time passed. Hours turned into days, and no sign of the girls could be found. Eventually, their family became involved and hired private investigators as they flew down to Panama to Berenguer to investigate the matter personally. All of this seemed to be of no avail. Days continued to pass, weeks, and even months, It wasn't until on June 9th, at the base of the Serpent River, that 2 backpacks were found. These were the backpacks of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Oddly though, they were in very nice shape, neatly packed and clean, as if they had been simply placed there. Odd indeed, for 2 girls who supposedly went missing in the woods. Inside the backpacks were 2 bras, 2 pairs of sunglasses, a water bottle, a passport, $83, Lisanne's camera, and 2 smartphones. The latter 2 pieces of evidence yielding the most startling conclusions in our investigation. Let us begin with the phone logs, which are most puzzling. They do show emergency calls being placed to both the Panama and Dutch emergency lines. However, most of them do not go through. And even when they did go through, they'd only stay on the line for a matter of seconds before hanging up. These emergency calls were spaced out, almost like they were scheduled. Perhaps the girls were trying to save the battery on their phones. Yes. Or perhaps whoever might have taken the girls was trying to make it appear as though they were calling for help. For each time after a call for help, the phones were quickly shut off. Maybe to keep from being triangulated the position of, or maybe just to save battery power by 2 girls lost in the woods. Over the next 2 days, the phones were turned on and off repeatedly. Some have speculated that the batteries might not have even been able to hold a charge being used in that manner for that long, implying that maybe they were being recharged, maybe by their captors. One of the most perplexing pieces of evidence that we found was that on April 5th, there were multiple attempts to unlock Kris's phone using the wrong passcode. However, it was completely unnecessary to unlock the phone to be able to dial emergency services. And if it was Lisanne, don't you think her friend would have already told her the passcode, especially being in such dire circumstances? Now let us move on to the camera, of which it contained hundreds of pictures. At the beginning, the majority of what you would expect 2 girls on vacation. However, they suddenly turned very dark indeed. Out of the last over 100 pictures that were taken, there were only 10 or so that were not taken at night, and that showed anything that could be discernible. Perhaps the girls were taking pictures to light up the darkness to make their way through the jungle, or perhaps they were trying to scare something off. A wild animal, a predator, a stalker. It's unknown. What is known is that several of these photos cannot be explained. There's one photo with sticks in a bag seen in their hostel beforehand. Plastic bag tied all about the stick. What did it mean? Is it a message, a sign, a map? Some kind of indication to the whereabouts is unknown. And yet here's another one. Kris's hair. And perhaps an injury. It's unknown as to why exactly this was taken. Did she fall? Were they hurt? And of course, one of the final, most telling photos cannot be discerned whether it is from a perspective of looking downhill or upwards, or potentially one of the girls is off in the distance. But this picture of the trail does mark the final picture we have from the 2 girls. This was image 508 out of 479 to 509. Strangely, image 509 had been deleted. Not in such a way as though it could have been done from the camera, though. It was deleted entirely from the playlist, having left the slot still on this. Investigation indicates it would have needed to be plugged into a laptop to delete that photo in this manner. What was on that photo? We can only wonder. Did the two girls actually get a picture of their attacker? And afterwards, they tried to break into the phone and remove the evidence himself. With a backpack so neatly placed for the authorities to find, an attempt to sway authorities from his trail. Now, over a month later, new evidence suddenly comes to the surface. After reviewing the footage from the cameras, authorities are notified by the same tour guide that was supposedly supposed to take the girls out. What he had found was a pair of neatly fitted jeans, a pair of shoes, sadly one with a foot inside, pieces of a fractured pelvic bone, 33 assaulted bone fragments. DNA findings were ascertained that the foot and the bone fragments were Lisanne's, and that the pelvis belonged to Kris. What was most interesting about the state of these bones was that the foot seemed to have been cleanly severed. What's important to note here is that had she fallen and broken the foot, or had some animal got on ahead of her and gnawed it off, there would be clear-cut damage, there would be signs of teeth marks, there would be cracking and splintering in the bone. However, it was cleanly severed, as mentioned before, as if a blade had taken it right off. This implies foul play and man-made interference. The pelvis, too, was suspiciously sun-bleached. When compared to normal bones left in the wild, this would not have happened by some time. It's almost as if it had been tampered with. Certainly, this shows a need for more follow-up investigation. Additionally, a few months later, a tibia bone on a piece of skin that has been traced back to the girls was discovered. Again, suspicious, because the skin showed no signs of the usual decomposition. It's as if it had been kept preserved, possibly as a trophy. In my opinion, one, the owner, knew was too dangerous to keep. With all the suspicious evidence coming to light, it is not unfounded to think that these girls met with something other than a natural end. In fact, for years that area has been known to be dangerous to outsiders. In August of 2009, a British man named Alex Humphrey had disappeared on the exact same trail. And in 2015, a young 23-year-old named Catherine Johannet was found strangled and beaten in the same area. In this particular region, it is known that gang activity and human trafficking does take place. However, it's been theorized that the local authorities turn a blind eye to it, do not report it at such a time, especially in the concerns of tourism, so it does not hurt the industry. But until proven, these will all just remain theories and allegations. Theories. It's not the theory of what happened to Lisanne and to Kris. The official theory and the declaration that the Panamanian government has issued is as such. The deaths were accidental. It was implied most likely due to becoming lost in the wilderness. A tragic circumstances. And to this day, the responsibilities for their deaths remains unclaimed and unheeded. just as the screams of justice silently echo through the jungles of Panama.